Hey, folks out there in Endurance Nation podcast and video land. This is Coach Rich, Endurance Nation, riffing very quickly on some thoughts in this our first week of of our internal out-season training. Today is Tuesday, October 28th. Yesterday, on the 27th, I sent my athletes downrange, starting their out-season, making them faster in preparation for when we make them far and put endurance on top of their faster selves come next February, March, and April. Okay, but right now, my folks, right now from November through March or April, they're focused on making themselves a faster 5K, 10K half marathon runner and a 40K time trial cyclist. And I did a lot of work with them at the end of their 2014 race season to keep them occupied and help them stay engaged and not lose a lot of that fitness, so that they can build the successes of their out season on top of the base that they build for 2014. So yesterday, my athletes tested on the bike to set their training zones, and my power athletes did a functional threshold power test. And so today, what I'm seeing in my forum is discussions of back up. Your functional threshold power is the watts that you can hold for a 60-minute time trial. And this is a functional measurement of how fit you are. Regardless of what your body's doing or how fit it is not, the functional expression of that fitness is the ability to put up watts X for 60 minutes. So that's the metric that we focus on, functional threshold power for my power athletes. So they have a history of functional threshold powers. So there is the FTP that I had at the end of my 2014 season. There's the FTP that I had when I started my out season last year, and now I just tested, and there's a difference. Typically, athletes have lost some watts, and so because I'm doing this out season with them, and I did my test on Saturday, vice theirs on Monday. Let me share with you, the power athletes out there, some thoughts on so how long is it going to take for me to get my power back? Okay, I've been training with power full time, whatever that means, full time, but since about 2002, and so I've been through many iterations of make myself very fit, power goes up. Season ends, I let myself go a bit, power goes down, now I got to get it back up, etc. So I've been through this cycle of starting at a low point, building up, racing with that, and then restarting that process over again. Okay, so let me share with you my experience on what that means with regards to getting your power back. In my experience, in your race season, you build yourself up to your in-season racing functional threshold power, okay? And then as you let yourself get out of shape, that FTP starts going down, but it reaches a basement level at which it doesn't really go under. So using myself, historically, over the years, I've been able to build myself up to a functional threshold power in race season of between 295 and 305 watts. Okay, and if because of injury, because of I'm not training, I'm not racing, whatever, if I let myself go and I don't exercise on the bike via a disciplined format, my basement FTP is about 250 watts. Okay, so and so it doesn't really go under that unless I fall really hard off the wagon. So I come off that, let's call it 300. I come off that 300 watts very, very quickly. It sucks how quickly it goes, right? But it doesn't really go under about 250 watts. So I've got my in-season racing FTP and I've got my basement FTP. A decline between those two can happen relatively quickly, but in my experience, I don't really go under that basement. And this is what I've seen with other athletes as well. Okay. Now, I start training, and uh, my third functional threshold power. I've got my basement, I got my race. I call it my training FTP. Okay, my training FTP is about 280 to 285 watts. And what I've noticed is athletes go from their basement functional threshold power to their training functional threshold power. That happens relatively quickly. It can happen in about 8 to 10 weeks of solid discipline work. Okay, so my basement's 250. I can get back up to 280, 285 in about 10 weeks, which leaves me with 15 to 20 watts that I have to find to bring me back to my historical FTP. Okay, this is where it starts getting hard, and the rate of increase, the rate of you increasing your functional threshold power decreases, meaning it takes more and more work applied over a longer period of time to chisel away and find that last 10, 15, or 20 watts that you had last year. Okay, so you might find yourself gaining a 20 to 30 watts inside 10 to 12 weeks, but then it takes an additional 10 to 12 weeks to eke out that last 10 to 15 watts. All right. So now do the math on that. It took you about 10 weeks to get back to your training FTP. And then it takes another, let's call it 10 weeks to get back up to your last season personal best FTP. That's about 20 to 24 weeks. Do the math on so October, now you're looking at about May by the time you start getting that back, okay? And right around May is when we have to start preparing you to, we have to start building endurance on top of that faster you, which means I have to add cycling volume, which means that generally the higher volume your cycling is, the more difficult it is to have continued gains in your functional threshold power, considering that at the same time you're also running more and swimming more. Okay, so the deeper we get into 2015, the farther we get past March, April, May, June, the more it's about putting endurance on top of your faster self and less about continuing to make you faster. Okay, so the net is, and then let me back up and say that all of those gain rates, the rates at which you make improvements, those are all also very much a function of your experience as an athlete. Okay, less experienced athletes, folks who haven't been in the game as long, you haven't come close to reaching your potential as an endurance athlete. So you will see gains very quickly, typically as a function of increased fitness, increased mental strength, increased ability to pace yourself, and a lot of it just has to do with you learning a new definition of what hard is and what hard work is. Okay, a combination of all of that means that an inexperienced athlete will see gains across that basement training racing spectrum more quickly than the experienced athlete will. Okay, so the net is that inexperienced athletes can see a tremendous gains across from the start of their OutSeason, call it October 2014, all the way through September 2015. Okay, you can see very, very large gains in your functional threshold power. More experienced athletes, you're often lucky to eke out a 5 to 10, 15 watt net positive season. Okay, again, my historical FTP is about 300, is between 295 and 305 watts. Um, and I've set a goal to get up to 315, which I did once in 2010 when I was training for Everest Challenge, and all I was doing was cycling. But if you're not a power athlete, and if you're not as, I mean, 295 and 315, those are really just two numbers. But when you've tasted and felt and commiserated and suffered through all the work it takes you to get inside, those 20 little numbers, I see just a world. What happens inside those 20 watts, both in terms of the work that's required and the payoff on race day. I see just such a depth inside those 20 watts. Okay, you, the experienced athlete, you've got your own numbers, right? If your historical high is 250 watts and your goal is to get up to 265 watts, that's only 15 watts, but you have an idea of what those 15 watts mean in terms of the focus that you need to apply to your training and what the payoff is on that for race day. Okay, so now that I've set a perspective on basement watts, training watts, racing watts, and the time frame it takes you to move between those, and a potential net gains for experienced versus inexperienced athletes. Let's now apply these across a discussion of bigger picture stuff. Okay. If my basement FTP is a percentage of my race FTP, and if my basement FTP then sets the stage for next season's functional threshold power, okay, then it makes sense that we should have a plan for making our basement into a crawl space, which is to say, not falling off the wagon, and maybe opening up that basement door and going 3 or 4 steps down, not all the way down on the couch with a pint of Ben and Jerry's watching NFL football. Okay, and so starting in July, Patrick and I did a lot of work trying to engage our athletes after their 2014 races, engage our athletes and have conversations about what's next. How do you as my athlete and me as your coach, how do we take this fitness that we work so hard, that you put in so much time, sweat, and blood and tears to build in 2014? What's the conversation we can have that motivates you, that keeps you engaged, that keeps you on a train that only puts you 2 or 3 or 4 steps down in the basement, so that when you start your out season, you're not starting in such a big hole, and I can get you back to your training FTP much more quickly, and I can build on that, and I can, rather than creating a net gain of 10 watts for 2015, maybe we can have a gain of 20, 25 watts. Okay, so there's that piece. Okay, it is engaging yourself. It's not having an off season, it having an out season. It is stepping back, understanding that you did a lot of work to get to where you are at the end of your season, and now it's about limiting how much you let that slip. Okay. Next is bust out your calculator and start doing some watts per kilogram calculations. Okay, just to make it easy. Okay, watts per kilo is a very objective. Okay, an FTP by itself doesn't tell the whole story. An FTP for an athlete who weighs an FTP of 300 watts for an athlete who weighs 170 pounds is very different from an FTP of 300 watts for some freak show that weighs 130 pounds. Okay, especially on hilly races where the roads go up. As the road goes up, speed up that hill is more and more a function of watts per kilo, power to weight. Okay, so the calculation is power divided by by your weight in pounds divided by 2.2, because there's 2.2 kilograms per pound. Yes. Okay. So start doing so right now. Take your FTP and do that, and figure out what your watts per kilo is. That's your starting point. And now, without touching the weight side, just start doing the math on, I start with an FTP of 220, and that's watts per kilo of X. And then I get it up to 230, and that's higher than X. And then I get up to 240, and that's higher than X again. Okay. Um, and as you start training with power, you will have a sense of how much work is required and focus that's required, to make that movement from 220 to 230 to 240 watts. Okay. Now, bust out your calculator again, and while you make those changes to your power, also make changes to the weight side of the equation. Okay. Also, so do some math and start to gain an appreciation of what it means when you tackle this watts per kilo problem, by going at it by attacking both sides of the formula. Okay. By making yourself lean. And you'll start to see that I can do a lot of work and on the bike, and if I don't apply that same attention to detail and discipline towards improving body composition, then my gains are X. If I apply a little bit of attention, and I have a system and accountability, and I'm using some smart tools, I can also improve body composition and greatly compound the work on the bike that I'm already going to be doing, right? So internally with my team, every week we have I've got a November OutSeason forum where everyone who's doing my OutSeason training plan right now, they're all mixing and mingling and sharing their experiences. Okay, I have a bike workout thread that we start each week where we talk about our bike workouts for this week. We have a run workout thread, and now we have a core and body composition accountability thread, because because I'm trying to have us as a team have me educate them and have them educate each other, and I learn from them about what are the systems that we can use as a team to improve body composition. That's simple, that gets us thinking about this stuff now, so that we have months and months and months to reach our race weight goals. What are simple accountability systems, i.e. a simple check-in once a week where, people check in on Monday and said, I weigh X against my goal of Y. I lost, I gained, I tried this, I tried that. I have a question about this, I have a question about that. And it provides a platform by which we can all learn, hold ourselves accountable to our peers, but most importantly, develop good habits that we then carry forward across our season. And related to that is I created for my athletes a 4-week core strength and swimming preparation routine. I started with 4 weeks. I'm gonna build out the next 4 weeks, and then the last 6 weeks to create a suite of core exercises and dryland swim exercises that we can then apply to all of our other training plans. But really, where my head's at right now is I've got 14 weeks of my athletes out season, and then I've got about then as a like depending on when their races are, I just know how much time in someone's season I have to make them faster. And I'm also trying to develop systems by which we attack the body composition side of the equation. And we're having these conversations now on October 28th so that we only have to set a weekly weight loss goal of maybe a half a pound, vice having athletes wake up in April trying to hit their body composition goals for a race in July, and they have to make up all this lost homework, and they're creating huge calorie deficits. But that's a conversation for another video and another podcast. So hopefully, folks, what you learned is limit the depth of your basement. I've given you some expectations about how quickly it's going to take to get back to your best power from your previous season, and how that rate of increase is going to fluctuate and change as you get deeper into your season. And I think that's it. So please check us out, endurancenation.us/join. Come on inside, create a free 7-day trial. These are all the things that I'm doing for my athletes. Come inside, check us out, decide, if our way of coaching our athletes works for you. But I can't stress enough about what, we're only 2 days into our OutSeason, which is not too late for you to join, by the way. But the amount of the vibe and the conversation and the encouragement and the learning is already just so powerful after only 2 days. So again, folks, check us out at www.endurancenation.us/join. Create a free 7-day trial. Thanks, folks. Bye.